Hey guys, it's Kat D and welcome to February 1st. So today I'm going to be doing my January wrap up because I can officially read no more in the month of January. So this month I was really trying to aim for 17 books. I got to 15. 9 were graphic novels and then the rest were like novels. Graphic novels count, guys. I mean, if it counts on Goodreads, it counts as a book. So let's just jump right in. So the first book that I read this month is Three Dark Crowns by Kendare Blake. And it was my first time in this world. I've never read it before. It is a YA fantasy novel. This book follows 3 different princesses, and they're triplets, and they were all separated at the age of 6. Now, the premise of this book is only one of them can, like, be the queen or the princess or rule the land, and each of them have individual gifts. For example, the gifts that are possible, you have a poisoner, you have an elementalist, you have a naturalist that can have like animal familiars. There's war gifted, there's people that can see the future. Like, there's all these different gifts that these people can be born with. And the mother just knows, whenever she has the triplets, she knows what their daughters are going to be. So these people, basically, when they turn 16, they have to go and kill each other. And only one of them can reign, only one of them can lead. And it's basically that. It's them, like, they were separated at 6. They don't really know each other. They all have their own special gifts. They come together at one time of year, and then all hell breaks loose because one of them is going to reign. Only one of them is going to survive. Like, that is the premise of this book. And then there's love stories and then other stuff in that, but that's basically the premise. I gave this book 4 stars. It wasn't the most, I gave it 4 stars because it was entertaining. I didn't find it all that difficult to read. I flew through it. Of course, it's YA. But even though I found there were some issues with it, I still wanted to keep reading it. So I did give it 4 stars. I am glad I read it. I loved it so much that the second book that I read this month was One Dark Throne by Kendare Blake. Jumped right back into it. I really can't tell you much about the second book. It is a continuation from the first book, and then we follow all the events that stopped right at the end of the book. And loved it just as much. I believe I gave that one 4 stars as well. I gave that one 4.5 stars. So yeah, so I think I liked that one a little bit more than I liked the first one, which is not surprising. I think actually even the first one I might have given it 3.5 stars, but I'm being nice, 4 stars. And then the second one I liked a lot better than the first one. Book number 3 that I read was, let's just talk about the third one. So I'm not going to do it in order. So the third one, I read the third one in this trilogy. I marathoned this series. I read the third one, Two Dark Reigns. And again, I really liked it. I gave this one 4 stars. And like I said, there are lots of issues. There are a lot of things that happen that I find that is too good to be true. I found that this book, while there was like certain moments in the books that were heartbreaking, there could have been like a lot more. Like, you could have taken me on more of an emotional roller coaster, because this book is set up to where, at first you don't have any attachment to any 3 of these different stories that you're getting perspectives from. It is not until the book evolves, and mostly like in the second book, that you really start to realize that, there's one particular one that obviously you're like, oh my gosh, I want this person, to rule. But yeah, so I marathon the trilogy. I can't wait till the last one comes out. I want to see how the conclusion goes. But yeah, so I loved that series. Yeah. All right, so the next 9 things that I read we're jumping right ahead, is Saga Volume 1 through 9. Now, I'm not going to tell you much about Volumes 2 through 9, but I'll tell you this premise of Saga. So Saga, I feel like it is a take on Romeo and Juliet. That's kind of how I see it. So it's these two different races that fall in love with each other, have a mixed baby, and then for the rest of their lives, they are like being chased down by bounty hunters and robots and all these different things that want to kill these people because these two different races should not love each other and they should not have a love child. This is by far one of my favorite graphic novel series that I've ever read. I'm going to reread one of my favorite graphic novel series, which is the Sandman by Neil Gaiman. I'm starting that in February. That'll be on my TBR. But this one, oh my goodness, it is heartbreaking. When I'm talking about like an emotional roller coaster, like don't get attached to anybody. Don't get attached to anybody because it's like the Game of Thrones of graphic novels. It is intense. People are always dying. People are like, it's graphic. Like really, I loved it. It's not for children. 18 or older, please. It is very graphic, but I love it. 10 out of 10 if it was a 10, but I gave most of them 5 out of 5 stars. There were some 4 stars like in some of those, but I'm just not going to go through all of them. You guys don't want to hear it. I don't want to make this really long, so there you go. And the next thing I read is The Night of Cake and Puppets. Now, I read this one. It's more like a little novella, and this puts you back in the world of the Daughter in Smoke and Bone trilogy, which I loved, by Laini Taylor. And you're getting kind of an insight from Zuzana and her love interest, whom you see in the Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy. So you kind of get a little insight to the side character, how she met her significant other, kind of like almost her POV, because in the Daughter of Smoke and Bone, you had one point of view, and then you had Karu's point of view, and then in this one you're going to have Zuzana's point of view, and Zuzana is the main, her best friend, like the side character. And yeah, it's cool to see. It was cool to read it after I read the trilogy because some of the things that she's mentioning are happening to Karu, or things that she's noticing about her friend are obviously different points of time in the trilogy that you've read already. So I love this. I believe I gave it a 5 out of 5. If not, it was a solid 4.5 out of 5. It was just super quick read. I love Laini Taylor. I am definitely reading Strange the Dreamer and Muse of Nightmares this year. TBR spoiler warning. Yeah, I can't wait. I love her writing. Okay, and the next thing I read was A Reaper at the Gates by Sabaa Tahir. This is the third installment in the Ember of the Ashes series. I can't tell you anything about it. What I can tell you is that it's so heartbreaking. I feel like this is probably going to be one of my favorite series of all time. You know, the more that I get invested in it, the more I go back and be like, oh my gosh, I really love this book more than I thought. Sometimes once you get done reading a book, you're like, okay, this book was about a 4-star read. And then after you like marinate in it and like you just can't stop like forgetting it, or like you can't forget it, like it just is embedded in your mind and things are like makes you think, you think to yourself, okay, maybe this was really a 5-star book for me. And I kind of feel that way about The Ember and the Ashes and A Torch Against the Night that I've read previously. But A Reaper at the Gates was definitely I gave it 4 stars, only because I did have a few issues, but not enough to I had to savor this book. It took me so long to read. I did not want it to end because we're still waiting on the 4th book. Thank goodness there's a 4th book, because if it ended like this, I would die. So I really can't tell you much about A Reaper at the Gates because it is the 3rd one in a series, but I can tell you kind of like about An Ember in the Ashes if you haven't read yet. So An Ember in the Ashes follows a young girl and her brother, Laya, and oh my gosh, what's her brother's name? Okay, I'm having a brain fart. But her brother, and something happens and she ends up having to try to save her brother. And through that, she ends up in this school where she meets a guy named Elias and a girl named Helene, and then shit gets real. Like things happen and things are so dire, and there's no sun in these books. It is literally like raining all the time. And I mean that not like literally, but like there's like no happy moments to me in this book. Like this book is like bad thing after bad thing after bad thing after bad thing. Like this is seriously, if Eeyore wrote a book, this is what it would be. But yeah, but it's still like you still get engrossed and you still have hope. You have hope through the entire thing. And then Sabata here just crushes your soul. Ah, loved it. If you have not read An Ember in the Ashes, actually, if you've read An Ember in the Ashes and you were on the fence about it, please pick up the second book. Pick up A Torch Against the Night. Read it because it is worth it. I felt another way about one of these series before. I read the Lunar Chronicles. Now, I read Cinder, and I'm a little bit older, so I love fairy tale retellings, but when I first read Cinder, it wasn't my favorite. And then I read Scarlet, and as soon as I read Scarlet, I loved Cinder. And I don't know if that makes any sense, but I got more attached to like the characters and the story because they were connected. And I was like, oh, one of my all-time favorite series is definitely the Lunar Chronicles, but that's this series for me. Like, it almost makes me realize that maybe I shouldn't give up on a series if I didn't necessarily just love the first book, because sometimes I think the author takes the feedback and really like, you know, grows as an author. And this story, Sabati Here's story, An Ember in the Ashes, is definitely an amazing book series. Okay, and the last book that I read this month, actually listened to this one, was Thunderhead by Neal Shusterman. Now, everyone and their brother loved Scythe. I did not love Scythe. I loved the premise, but I had a lot of problems with Scythe itself. I believe I gave that book 3 stars. And sorry, that might be an unpopular opinion. I know everybody loves it. Everybody gave it 5 stars. It's a great book. I don't think so. Like, I got to the end of the book and I was severely disappointed. The writing was okay. You know, the story was okay. The premise was amazing, but I wasn't engaged as much as everybody else, I feel like, was. And I was super excited. Like, I loved the premise. So I'll tell you about the premise of Scythe since I can't tell you much about Thunderhead. So Scythe is basically you're living in a world where no one can die of natural causes anymore. They have these things that dull pain. They don't die of diseases. There's no cancer. You know, if you die, they call it splatting, and then they bring you back to life. So no one can decide when you die anymore, except for these things that they call the Scythe. Okay, so at the beginning of this book, they pick, like towards the beginning of this book, they pick a girl and a boy, Citra and Rowan, and they become Scythe apprentices. Now, the thing about this is by the end of the book, or by the end of their training, only one of them can become Scythe. And that's basically what Scythe is about. And Thunderhead takes place right after that. So Thunderhead is actually, how do I put this in a way that you guys understand? It's kind of like the all-seeing, it's like the God. It's not God, but it's like God, right? So sees all, hears all, knows all, but doesn't interfere. Can't do really anything. I think that Thunderhead maybe can interfere if some certain things happen. If one of his laws or her laws are broken. I don't really know what it is, or her or him. It sounds like just a thing. And that's basically what the Thunderhead's about. And I mean, not the Thunderhead's about. That's what the Thunderhead is. And yeah, so that was that. Now, I loved Thunderhead. I did give Thunderhead, I think I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I'm not really a harsh I'm not a harsh critic. Like, I just want to enjoy reading it. It doesn't have to be the best writing in the world. I just have to enjoy reading it. And that's kind of how I rate my books. But yeah, that was the 15 books that I read in the month of January. Let me know what you guys are reading down below. I love fantasy, science fiction, and graphic novels. So if you have any recommendations, put them down there. Even if they're not those genres. I love those genres, but you know. Anyway, hit that big thumbs up, comment down below, and subscribe, guys. Bye.